I'd like to bring this meeting to order of the Historic Preservation Commission for Tuesday, November 19th, 2019. Okay, everyone's present, I see. So with that, I think let's get the approval for the meeting minutes for October 15th, 2019.
Okay, I was going to mention,
Yes.
I have changes. For present, I'm sorry that I kind of goofed this up, but we have Carolyn Zinke as twice, so we'll keep her as chairman pro tem. Solomon, you were here,
Yep.
because I had marked you out as absent, so I'll correct that. And then, Commissioner Hiller, you were not here, so I put you in the absent line.
Okay. Okay.
And that's it for me.
Okay. Any other additions or changes to the meeting minutes? If not, I'd like to get a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll move to approve the meeting minutes from October the 15th.
As amended?
As amended, yeah.
And a second?
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? I abstain, and Mr. Hiller abstains. Okay. Let's see, the next thing on our agenda is the 5-minute field guide from Mr. Lambert. Documentation versus conjecture.
Thank you, Chairman Zelmer. I chose this topic this evening because a lot of applicants will ask, how do we know what a building looked like, or where do you go for the information? I like to always try to demystify that I don't have some special pipeline. So tonight is really about documentation versus conjecture to avoid false historicism, which of course is one of the standards of the SOI standards that we use, is to avoid false historicism. So often what people think the past looked like isn't very accurate. Cultural and natural resources combined with access to materials, fashion, and regional experiences all help to shape the architectural environment of Geneva and every other community. Geneva's architecture is unique, although it does bear common elements to other things that were happening around the country and in Illinois and even in northeastern Illinois. So the question is, how does one determine what was the authentic architectural character of Geneva in general, or of a specific location in the community? The answer can't always be found in a single source. Sometimes the simplest place to start is by looking up at a building. This is not in Geneva for those who are trying to figure out where it is. But I chose this because this has a very simple example of showing two buildings where you can see there was a building that had a different shape adjacent to it at one time that doesn't exist anymore. But also, if you look at the details of the buildings, you will see there are window changes that vary from floor to floor. There are areas that have been altered, such as the glass block on the first floor and the lower level. So by looking at the building, you can start to discern what is original and what is probably not original. But locally, it's a good place to start is looking at the great resources that we have on local history. There are several books that I have here in my library in the office that I refer to often that give me historic views of Geneva in earlier times, as well as giving history about people and places to understand how and when things evolved. Kane County is fortunate to have an incredible amount of records and resources that are available online or in local repositories. As many of you know, you've seen a lot of my images I use in the reports are credited to the Geneva History Museum, which again has incredible archives and historic photographs. But Kane County has online records for properties, and that also is a valuable tool to help understand when a building may have been built and what influences touched it. For residential examples, many of you are familiar with field guide books. These are two issues of the same book, but these field guides are very typical from one to the other. They typically have basic information about the particular style, including the date when it was most prevalent. And you need to note that often those are when they're most prevalent across the country. Some styles did not arrive in northeastern Illinois as early as they arrived in other places in the country, and sometimes they lingered much longer than the national average. But the guidebooks will give details such as windows and doors and trim and roof shapes to give a general idea of what may have been on a building, as well as giving photographic examples of buildings of that particular style. But long before the field guides were written, there were books published as early as the 1830s that helped carpenters and builders build the buildings that we see around us. These books are fabulous sources of information because they help the average builder learn how to build fairly complicated elements of architecture, from detailed cornices to spiral staircases, how to assemble a door, and what the proper details of a formal classical entrance should look like. When you look at later homes of the late 19th century and early 20th century, we have a lot of catalog homes, and we can go actually to some of the catalogs that have been preserved over time and actually be able to identify those specific homes that were built using these catalog, mail order catalog plans. Just as there are for residential, there are examples of commercial buildings, commercial catalogs. This is the George L. Mesker Ironworks, which was one of the largest companies that manufactured cast iron storefronts and metal cornices. The catalog shows various buildings and various patterns that you could purchase. But what's interesting on the upper right corner is a page from their catalog that actually was separable, and you could mix and match the different components of a building, so you could look at what your building might end up looking like. That becomes invaluable to architects, preservation architects in particular, because sometimes you're trying to figure out what components belong on a building. You can see that sometimes they were mixed and matched from the very beginning. Just as iron storefronts are available, there are catalogs that show how wooden storefronts were put together for commercial buildings. Architectural detailing has relied for many, many years on a book called Architectural Graphic Standards. They were starting to be published in the 1920s, and as various details evolved or were done away with or introduced in a new fashion, architectural standards help people understand how buildings were put together. So not only is that valuable to understand historic building systems and what might be expected, what types of construction might be expected, but also helps understand what kind of building methods and processes were abandoned also in favor of different details. There are also resources that architects are familiar with, such as Sweet's Architectural Catalog, which was basically an encyclopedia of building products and materials. And again, they started being published in the 19-teens, and now is basically an online source, but that again has primarily the products that were available to architects and builders for those given periods. There are books written on just about every kind of building that you would want to look into. So whether it's a simple barn or outbuilding or a highly ornate church, there are books that are available to look at and understand, again, what the details were for different periods and different styles. I would claim that any good preservation architect is going to have a very large library of resources that vary from field guides and different types of architecture to dictionaries that explain what the different parts of buildings are. A lot of times we have terms that we no longer use today, but we need to know what it was so we can look up what it was intended to be originally. Style books and all sorts of resources such as that. We're fortunate that we have online resources, and one of the really fantastic opportunities is the Association for Preservation Technology for 20th century building products. They have created a heritage library that has been, for the last about 10 years, cataloging old sales brochures of modern era materials. And that is accessible online to see how products from the 1950s and 1960s and 70s and 80s were being used. And again, the National Park Service, who we rely on for a lot of support, has technical briefs or preservation briefs that, again, will define not only how to preserve a building, but will also help in identifying what components belong in a building, and, again, also identifying them by name. So in closing, I would just say that today, research is much easier than it was when I started 35, 40 years ago, when we did card catalogs and put in call slips to wait for information. We now have the advantage of the internet, and again, many publications are available. So again, all these sources are available to document authentic history rather than try to imagine or guess at what historic buildings should look like based on our own imagination. Are there any questions?
I have one, actually. Do you use Sanborn maps quite a bit?
Yes, I didn't touch on that because we did a whole session on Sanborn maps, but yes.
Which I missed.
Well, I will have to get you that presentation then.
But who holds those Sanborn maps?
For Geneva, we have black and white copies here through my office.
Okay.
The Geneva History Museum has colored copies for most years, and then the University of Illinois is probably the largest repository of Sanborn insurance maps, their map and geography department.
Very good.
They have them online, but you have to don't you have to sign up, or there's some way to get them online, isn't there?
Yes, yes.
But not, do you have, can we access them, or is it?
I don't know. I access it as an alumni member, so I don't know what the non-alumni have to do to get to the maps and catalogs.
I don't think it's free, yeah.
I don't think it's free either.
What if you have a son going there? Use his.
Use his.
Yeah.
Okay?
Thank you. Okay, if that's it, then we'll move on to review of building permit applications. If you're ready. The first one is 201 North 3rd Street.
Thank you, Chairman Zellmer. 201 North 3rd Street is a project that has come before the commission several times as it's continued to progress with its rehabilitation. To orient everybody, the property is located on 3rd Street, just north of Peyton, in the northern portion of the local historic district and in the northern portion of the North Geneva Historic District listed in the National Register of Historic Places. You're all familiar with this Greek Revival building that dates to 1858. But to refresh your memory of some of the history on it, the building was built in 1858, has been remodeled several times, and was at some point covered with stucco that was then removed, and the siding was sandblasted. Also, please recall that as the applicants have moved through this project, their original commitment was to try to preserve the wood siding if at all possible. However, you'll also note that at the very first meeting of this, I had suggested to the commission that I was of the opinion that they may come to the conclusion that the siding might not be salvageable because it was in pretty tough shape. And that's what brings the applicant here this evening, is that after making a lot of the extensive structural repairs, including a new foundation under the building, and replacing windows and dealing with some of the other details of the building, they've come to the conclusion that the siding is not salvageable in this case. The areas that are being proposed for replacement are the residence itself and not the garage. Some examples of what has been found is these are some views, close-up views of the siding, and you can see some areas perhaps, and I should have brought this, that the applicant has identified as being some of the typical problems. Whoops, let me go there. So you'll see that some of the siding has cupped, so it's actually curving and bowing. Other parts have split. There are some that are split through the material itself, and there is some that is split right at the lap of the clapboard. So the nails go through and support the upper portion of the lap siding, but the lower portion is split away from that and is not attached at this point. You can also see from the image on the right how the siding has been striated from the abrasive nature of the sandblasting that we mentioned earlier. So I won't belabor this. I'll let the applicants go through this in greater detail if you need, but they have assembled a very easily understood graphic to go along with photographs of their survey of the actual clapboards board by board and identified what they believe is salvageable and non-salvageable. And based on this analysis and assessment, they've come to the conclusion that the siding should be replaced. So these images are all here. They can explain. The proposal is to use LP Smart Side with a smooth finish, which we have seen before this commission before, and then use smooth trim boards as well to match what was existing. Also note that the request is to replace the siding and the trim, but not to affect the entablature or that heavy molding that goes at the roof line around the building. That will be preserved and has stayed intact. So at this point, I would turn the dais over to Frank Giampoli, the owner.
Good evening.
You need to highlight anything. This is the,
I won't belabor the points that have already been made. Obviously, we've been before you several times, and each time has been really a ratchet up of what we didn't anticipate when we first bought the property, starting with the original cellar that we were hoping to save by pulling the walls back in and putting them back on top of the cellar, and that couldn't be done, and we came in front of you and said we had to put a new basement underneath it in order to have this house exist 20 more years, let alone 120 more years. That added a huge amount of cost. I'm glad that the house now is on a foundation. It's not in the air anymore. I know it was one of the eyesores of Geneva for about 7 or 8 weeks there. The survey on the boards, I think, came out with about 90% of them are not usable. The ones that we will be pulling off that are usable, we'll use on the garage because we had to take the first 2 or 3 layers of the garage up. So we'll be able to re-salvage those on the parts of the garage that have got destroyed in the moving of the garage from one location to the other. We also note that the window locations the windows had been replaced before. They weren't under the freeze board before. We're actually putting them up where they should have been originally and probably were originally. So that's being taken care of, and all the windows were okayed through Michael and the permit department here for Geneva. The front door is an interior door that they took half the door away, put windows in, and then try to repurpose it as an exterior door. It's not usable that way. We have tried to salvage what we could during the construction of the project. We understand how important that is. It's also important for my state historic certificate when we've dealt with Darius in the past. So we've done what we can while keeping an eye on the big picture, which is a house that we can be all proud of for the next 150 years. Any questions about anything?
I'd like to thank you for your survey, for its being thorough, concise, and easy to follow. So thank you. I have no objections, but I do have a question. Who made the determination? Who did the survey? I mean, who made the determination of which boards are salvageable, and what was the criteria? Just quickly, not to belabor it.
So Sean Gallagher Associates Architects. So fortunately, we could count up every board. So Arnie is the contractor on the project. So what we did was we counted every board, and then visually we were able to determine, first of all, if it was checked or cracked, and then we counted those boards that were cracked, and then also any that had knot holes or things like that that were exposed. Now, we didn't use the criteria specifically of over sandblasted because visually from the ground, and at the time, we couldn't actually get to the second floor to look out from the second floor because it wasn't stable at the time, so we had to do it essentially from the ground to evaluate it. So we counted up the boards that were cracked. What we found was a large majority of the boards have this issue. Well, I'll go over to here. This issue here where it's a beveled siding. There's a whole mix of siding. There's actually flat boards as well as beveled, but the beveled siding, many of them were cracked where the nails had gone through. Michael had pointed this out already, but so it failed in that joint between the bottom lap and that portion. So, and again, whether it was because of the fact that this was once concealed in a stucco structure, I don't know, but yeah. So that was the criteria.
Numerous spots where daylight comes through.
one of the things I'd like to add, just because I know that they went through this exercise, they also evaluated the boards that had parts of them missing. So there were several, not several, but there were quite a number of clapboards where the lower portion of the clapboard had either fallen off or chipped away over time, probably again as a result of the stucco covering being put on it. And they also, just because I know how thorough they were, I just want to make sure it's clear. There's a good example of showing some of the boards up on the south elevation that are checked. If you can see, they're not even. But also the amount of replacement that had occurred on here, as Sean just barely touched on, there is quite a combination of siding on here, and that has also impacted how some of it survived, where they've put straight siding behind beveled siding, and it's created cracking behind that. So they did go side by side, and I was out the job site several times looking at the siding as well to confirm that what they were bringing back to you was accurate.
We also had constructed issues. So for instance, where the bay was, you may or may not recall, but the bay had an internal gutter, and so that gutter was actually back pitched into the house. So that's why we see a significant amount of rot here, as well as there, if we were to get a close-up of this, you'd see a lot of the boards were rotted out along this edge as well. So that bay was a source of some grief for the siding as well.
Follow-up question. I don't have the pack in front of me, but the State of Illinois Preservation Commission has seen this and approved this?
Yes.
Already?
Correct.
More questions?
Any other questions?
Well,
Comments?
I just have a comment. I'd like to thank both of you for the great deal of work and effort that you're putting into this, and I know there's a great deal of money that's involved in this too. And I think it's wonderful that you've done this. And I'm also, as you probably know, we have had a few siding issues that we have discussed for a while, and I love the fact that you were so thorough when you did your survey. You explained it very thoroughly to us, and I just thought it was wonderful how you were serious about determining that the siding had to be replaced. So thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
I have one question about the windows that are the freeze board windows. Was there any evidence from the framing on the inside that that's the way they were?
And Arnie, you may be able to speak to this better, though there's really no headers.
Oh, there
So-
aren't, okay.
Right. So we would have assumed that you'd see a header here. Our guess is that there was a stock unit
Yeah.
that fit the opening width, but the height wasn't good. So they just simply set the sill and then trimmed down to it. So that's kind of what our gut's telling us based on the evidence inside.
For the original window or for the replacement window?
Well, again, for the original window, we don't know because
Yeah,
we
but there's
don't
no
have-
header there's a ridge board around or there's a
There is a rim, yeah.
rim board, but
Right,
that's it, right?
right.
I was just curious. Okay. Can I get a motion to,
Is this for the siding
this is for the.
only, or siding, windows, and door?
The windows and doors were already determined. We had gotten approval for the staff to approve those administratively because they'd been replacement windows already. So we've been working back and forth with the state. As he mentioned, it's a tax assessment freeze project. So I've been working back and forth with the applicant and the state to make sure that the SOI standards are being followed and applied for new replacement windows and door.
So someone put together a motion to approve?
I'll move to accept the request for siding replacement at 201 North 3rd Street as presented.
And I'll-
Second.
Okay.
Sorry, second?
We're going to,
I was going to second, but that's okay.
okay,
Okay.
okay. Roll call?
Hamilton,
Aye.
Hiller,
Aye.
Sullivan,
Aye.
Stazen,
Aye.
Warner,
Aye.
Zinke,
Aye.
Zelmer.
Aye.
Passes.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, the next is 120 North 4th Street, which Mr.
Mr.
Hamilton.
Chairman, I'd like to recuse myself because of my involvement.
Okay. We will bring you back when we're done.
Have a nice time.
Thank you, Chairman Zelmer. 128 North 4th Street is a project also in the North Geneva Historic District listed in the National Register of Historic Places. It's in the northern portion of our local historic district. It's located at the corner of 4th and Peyton Street. And as you may or may not be aware, this is one of the significant properties in our historic district because it is associated with not only a local businessman, but also the building was built by the Wilson brothers. Also to note, the wraparound veranda was added in 2007 and is not part of the historic property. The addition to the west was added sometime between 1970 and 1980, and the existing deck that you see here was added sometime between the 1970s and late 1980s as well. To give you an idea about the property, you can see that the house and garage and the developments or the improvements occupy a large portion of the lot. There's very little rear or side yard to this property, so the only real area for the applicant to be able to develop for social space is in the required street yard, and that's why this project is coming forward to you, because it's a landscape improvement at a significant property within the street yard, and therefore is visible from the public right-of-way. Just to highlight the area of the existing patio area, or deck area, I'm sorry. It's a combination at-grade patio and deck. Some views of the existing conditions if you have not been by the property. So the proposal is to remove the existing paver brick and wood deck and replace it with an at-grade patio. The area will be surrounded by a wall built of, again, tumbled concrete units. The property, even though it's very highly developed, is part of the new zoning category that's identifies DMHR, which is, again, a high-density, medium high-density residential, according to the new zoning ordinance, which you remember reviewing here at the commission level. So the applicant is showing that they currently have about 50.8% lot coverage. They are looking to increase that to 52.2%. And just for reference, in this zoning district now, 65% lot coverage is allowable. So it's well within the allowable lot area. So with that, that's an introduction to the project. Jim Haugen from Planscape is here to talk to you more about the project or answer any of your questions that you may have. Jim?
Mr. Hamilton came to me several years ago to start at the beginning phases of this project, and his goal, of course, was to improve the quality visually, aesthetically, with removing the old wooden deteriorating deck structure and replace it with something that would be a little more consistent with the style of the house and the neighborhood. The wooden decking has a real distinctive modern or contemporary kind of slant to it. And we tried to look for materials and a footprint or a layout that would hopefully harmonize or coordinate with the rest of the neighborhood. I believe that if there are questions with the plan that's shown here, I could answer that, but that was my intention in the design. The stairway that comes from the addition to the top of the page there is intended to mimic the stairway that comes down from the wraparound veranda. We're taking away the more distinctive contemporary benches and wide platform type steps.
How tall is the wall?
The wall is a sitting height. It's approximately 20 inches high. because does front on a public space, we're hoping to create a little bit of a privacy or intimacy there for that sitting area. The plan doesn't show the garden materials that are part of the eventual completed plan, but that space that's shaded in light green there is all a garden space.
So overall, it's still not any higher than what's there now, I would
Not
imagine.
any higher than the benches that wrap around, yeah, it is not. No.
Okay. Any other comments?
Simple project, straightforward.
Yeah.
It's a great idea.
No, just that if it's approved, we tell Jim that it wasn't, and he has to resubmit when he comes back.
He can actually hear what's going on.
Okay. Can I get a motion?
I move to approve the plan submitted for revising the existing raised wooden deck with a grade level patio as presented for 128 North 4th Street.
And I'll second.
Roll call?
Hiller.
Aye.
Solomon. Aye. Stazen.
Aye.
Warner.
Aye.
Zinke.
Aye.
Zelmer.
Aye.
Is there any type of a variance that's required for that, since it's on the street side?
No, it complies with zoning.
Great. Thank you very much.
Jim. Oh, it's not open.
Knock on the door and let him back in. Sorry to tell you.
Yeah, you have to come
Okay.
back. We didn't approve.
Our next applicant is 525 Franklin Street.
Thank you, Chairman Zelmer. 525 Franklin Street is located in the Central Geneva Historic District and is in the southwestern portion of the local historic district. The property was part of a larger parcel that has been subdivided in the last several years to create two lots. It is located at the corner of 6th and Franklin Street and has kind of a unique location in our historic district, and the fact that there are historic homes to the south and to the east, and new infill homes to the north and northeast, and the Geneva Public Library being built to the west. So it is in an area that has quite a diverse palette of architecture in the immediate neighborhood. The property consisted originally of this 1909 two-story stucco home that is being preserved and is to the lot east of what is being proposed to be built upon. The owners of the property, George and Sharon Milton, brought forward this concept of a home that they liked and wanted to build here in Geneva, and so Mr. Augustine and his architect, Dan Marshall, came together with this concept based on that initial idea. You can see how it relates to the 1909 historic home to the east at 521 Franklin Street. They provide these renderings of the proposed residential development, and I would just point out that there is shown a pergola joining the garage and the house. That pergola is not being constructed as a joining element. It will be a freestanding pergola, not joining the house to the garage. Again, some plans for reference. I've shaded them to help make the architectural plans a little more legible for you. The second floor, and again, as I mentioned, the pergola that is shown here will not actually be an attached element between the house and the garage. The building materials, we have samples here for you to look at, but it is a combination of painted masonry, fiber cement shingles, asphalt shingles, metal roofing, and then what was formerly known as the integrity line from Marvin, which you have approved before. It now has a new line name. I think it's the executive line. I can verify that for you. The windows will be black in color. The building will be primarily white in color with a gray asphalt shingle roof. The door will be a wood-looking door, and again, I have some information on that. And the garage doors will be a stamped steel carriage-style door on the garage itself. So these are similar to the proposed materials. This is the palette. So again, the Elevate collection is the name of the new line by Marvin, which was the Integrity Wood Ultrex that you've approved. Again, some type of a wood-looking front door, a black metal roof with a low-profile seam, which is what we've approved in recent projects, and then a stamped steel carriage door for the garage. And then, again, the painted masonry exterior walls, James Hardy fiber cement shingles for the majority of the siding. The soffit will be LP Smart Side with a smooth finish, as will be the architectural trim on the building. And then some elements such as the architectural brackets that are shown around the house will be a 5-pound material, so again, a composite material. That is the gist of the project. This time I would turn it over to...
Could I ask a question? I'm
Yes.
a little confused. Were all these elevations and cut sheets in our packet?
No, not all of them
So
were.
we're seeing this all for the first time?
You should have had the,
We had a couple of drawings,
Yes.
renderings.
yes, you should have had the renderings. Yes,
This is it.
That's all?
yes. So,
So was it in the packet and we didn't get it, or?
no, it was not in your packet. Partially my fault. The information was here. It just did not get in your packet because of the timing of getting the packet out. So,
Okay.
so I apologize. It's not the applicant's fault. Everything was in on time with the applicant. So,
And this is not a concept review, this is for a permit?
this is a permit review, yes.
Okay.
So. Tom?
Good evening, Todd Augustine, Augustine Custom Development, 1226 Fargo Boulevard in Geneva. And I don't have anything really prepared in addition to what Michael has shared. I think he's done an excellent job of sharing the story, how it's kind of gone through the evolution of the homeowners and their desire and of what the home would look like, and the materials and all other information was provided. So I'm happy to address any questions that you might have.
I do have a couple, I guess. First of all, I remember when we were discussing the adjacent property, wasn't that existing garage supposed to be relocated to the other property?
Yes, and it has been.
It has been. And wasn't there an easement or something required to get to the garage?
Yes, and there has been.
Okay, but I didn't see any easement on the floor plan there that showed the garage. How does one get to, because that is part of the site development.
There's a access easement that's been granted in perpetuity for the 521 property that comes in from 6th Street and is at the back 8 feet of the 525 property.
So it's
that'll be
just a driveway?
It's a driveway, right. Mhm.
A curb cut and another driveway next to the existing, to the new garage and driveway.
That is correct.
Okay, because that doesn't show up on the plan.
It is on the site
It
plan.
is on the site plan that the building department
I
has.
didn't see the site plan, yeah. Okay.
So to clarify that, there is a single apron with 2 driveways coming off the single apron off of 6th Street.
Because that is part of the aesthetics of the whole elevation there. And so this rendering then is really moot because it doesn't reflect the materials that, to me, this looks like a painted stucco. I don't see any differentiation between, you said shingles and parts of it. I saw it on the architectural drawings, but not on those renderings. That's just kind of a smooth white kind of.
Yeah, I hope that the 3D rendering does not confuse the commission. I provided it as an additional tool. The homeowners requested that the architect do it for their, their view, their ability to understand it. But this was not, again, this was not part of, I don't think, of the request or an official request of the commission. It's the drawing. So if this is confusing, then, yeah.
What was in our package.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
If you want to see the full architectural drawing.
Could we go back to the other elevations then that reflect the materials that? Okay.
So this is
You have a west elevation, or is that not shown in the packet? Oh, there it is, okay.
Here we go.
And on the garage, why are those shaded, those elements between the garage doors shaded even more than the rest? Is that a different material there?
I don't know why that's shaded.
That's the architect's drawings show that if you look at the full set, those are shear walls that are being designed, so that's shading to indicate the shear walls on the garage, but they are also shingle. The majority of the building is shingle, with the front tower element being brick up to that banded area near the roof.
And the shingles are white as well?
Yes, we have all the, yes.
I like this design, but I'm a little uncomfortable with having to vote on this without having seen any of this to kind of look at it in advance. I mean, it's
Well,
not your fault.
I did what I was requested to do and asked that this be the formal voting timeframe. I have clients that, we've got the permit submitted 3 weeks ago. Building department is waiting for this recommendation, so, I did do everything within my power to bring to the commission what was asked for, and within the time
Within the
frame.
timeframe.
Sure. Well, actually, a couple weeks prior to the original time. I had everything turned in on, I believe it was November 4th.
Okay, can you explain more fully, looking at the west elevation here, which materials are being used where?
Do I have that? I have to pick a side here. I'm getting fingers here. So you're seeing this area right here, which is the painted brick area. The entire west elevation is then the hardy shake shingles, with the exception of the brick fireplace.
And is that the shingles that is being passed around now?
Yes, it is.
I see, okay.
Yes, yeah, and as well as the garage, the homeowner feels that the homeowner felt that the west side of this property was very important from a community standpoint, wanted to make sure that it was done extremely well. I think you would typically have seen a different product on the side of a home versus the front. So you can see that they also asked or suggested that we put the shakes on the garage also.
Are the shakes to be used on all four sides of both structures?
Yes.
So it's shingle above and then brick below? Is that what I'm reading?
No, it's
All shingle.
the entire structure. Everything with the exception of the front is shake.
Okay. And please tell me why the brick is being painted.
To get the look and effect that was shown, the inspiration on one of the first pictures that Michael had shared, that's what that, I don't know how we go back, Michael. So this house that you see here, on the left, if you look close at that, that is a painted brick.
It is painted brick?
Yes. Mhm.
Okay. Okay.
I have a general question for staff. I wasn't part of the commission when the rest of that block was developed. How does this proposal differ in any significant way from those other newer homes that were infilled?
The easiest answer is it doesn't. It meets all of the zoning setbacks and requirements, just as those homes did, so this is very complementary to the development that was done on the Campbell Street side of this block.
The elevations are a lot easier to read on the drawings.
Yeah.
Than they are on there.
Yeah.
That's the front elevation, the one fronting Franklin.
Good, good.
Yeah, that's brick.
And if you can zoom in, on a computer screen, if you zoom in, it helps sometimes too. It's a little tough to pick up on this.
So that's what they're looking at now. It does illustrate a little better the intent.
Good, thank you.
So now that one there, is that stucco there?
No, that is brick.
Oh, it's painted brick.
So without seeing the site plan again, there's one cut. It's a double driveway with one set going to this garage and the other passing behind.
Right, and there's approximately about a 2-foot green space between the two driveways.
And that's,
Once it gets past the public right-of-way, it then opens up a little bit, and there's some green space that separates, softens the area.
And it meets all the height restrictions for the house?
Building and plan have looked at this, it does conform with all the zoning and infill requirements for bulk and for setbacks. The reason the pergola is not joining the house to the garage is because of zoning review that turned it into an attached garage, and that would have affected how the lot coverage or how the buildings could have been set back. So the applicant has agreed to make that a freestanding pergola and not connect the house to the garage, and that was the only zoning issue that was raised in review. Correct.
Talking about the pergola, from looking at the diagrams, it looks like the pergola is a solid wall.
It's deceiving. Yeah, it does. It
What
kind of
will it
comes
look-
across.
what will it be?
It will be open. It will be a timber type of structure.
I see. So if you were standing by the pergola, you could look through it to see the yard adjacent.
Absolutely.
I see, okay.
does this structure completely occlude the little window door of the adjacent home?
It does.
I noticed that today when I drove by.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the garage doors are brown and the rest of, and the roof is black?
No, I believe the garage doors are going to be white.
Oh,
Yes.
oh, okay.
Yeah, if you look at the one, yeah, I'm not sure, let me see here. There, the bottom left, you don't even, it kind of blends in with the paper.
Got it, okay.
How much taller is this house than 521 Franklin?
I think you're referring to this right here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe we're within our zoning. I think and again, I am not 100% without checking this, but I think we're at 31 or 32 feet on the new house, and the house on the right, the Clyde Sharon Jones home, I believe is 28 feet.
28.
So it's,
So we're about 4 feet taller.
yeah,
About.
to my recollection, yes.
Okay, I see.
I don't object to the design. I had one question. It says in there, your description, the home borrows and reinterprets architectural elements found throughout the district. Now, I kind of get the roof line from the tower area on the one house with the Jones house, but maybe you could tell us what else you're reinterpreting or you found or where you got it from? Or did you just get it from that other image?
You mean the design of this?
Yeah,
It
I
came
mean-
from the original image that I'd
Okay.
shown a little bit ago, yes.
So it's
Yeah.
not really reinterpreting anything from the district?
No, I mean, I think that was kind of a little bit I don't mean to throw you under the bus, but a little bit of Michael's language on that.
My comment was there, if you look around the neighborhood, you have a combination of brick, you have brick, you have shingle, if you walk the neighborhood, all those elements are present both in the historic buildings and in the new buildings. It's not a reinterpretation of any particular style, it's a reinterpretation of how the materials are used throughout the neighborhood.
Okay, I'll buy that.
Yeah.
But style-wise, we have that arch on the east elevation, and then on the south, that element above the front door, which almost has a Tudor-looking
Right.
It does.
kind of element to it. So there seems to be a variety of different elements here, and without a central kind of theme.
Well, the architect actually identified this as English arts and crafts, but I didn't know.
I see that.
I didn't know how familiar everybody was with that particular style, and so I did not use his terminology, but that's what the inspiration is, kind of an English arts and crafts building. And again, when you look at the neighborhood, it's a very eclectic neighborhood. So for instance, the 1909 building to the east, 521, did not really have a precedent in the neighborhood when it was built. So again, my comments in there about the style is that it is a reinterpretation of the neighborhood palette, essentially, not a reinterpretation of any specific building within the district.
Michael's got it.
You looking for these?
I think something that's a little bit deceiving is in this drawing, right, or in this, that's actually a roof.
Yeah, that is
not-
absolutely, yeah,
It's
that's,
not gonna be.
right, you can see there where the,
If you look at the rendering,
Oh,
it shows
Up here.
more of,
yeah,
it's more
it-
of a roof than it is
yeah,
a,
the rendering is,
vertical,
yeah.
there with the Tudor effect. Okay, it's
Yeah.
kinda got it.
I,
You've looked at this a lot longer than we have.
yeah.
Yeah.
I assure you.
yes.
Actually, that reminds me a bit of a sleeping porch with the windows all banded together.
I don't find anything that, if it were a concept review, I might have some other comments, but it's not, so it's not, I don't find anything that's.
I would appreciate hearing your
My only
comments.
comment is that it's too bad we couldn't have flipped the tower element to the west side and kept the lower portion to the east. and
Adjacent to the.
Adjacent to the
house.
shorter house and the taller
Yeah, that-
quote-unquote library.
Yeah, that would have been a nicer idea.
But
See, I think just the opposite. I think having the tower against Sixth Street would almost make it feel
taller?
off the other way. I would rather see the tower closer to the, or away from the street.
Yeah, I mean, I thought if it mirrored, it might be, it might be more, the lower portion might work better, but there, it isn't as tall as it's not as tall as, I think the banding is gonna help that. Bring it down a little bit.
And then from the street, you won't really see, I believe, when you're standing on Franklin, how tall the roof is behind because of the
Yeah, the foreshortening.
the shorter
You're correct.
portion of the front,
Yeah,
yes.
the foreshortening of that will bring it back down.
It will, yes, yes.
So, I mean, I don't have a problem with it, though.
And of course, when you turn the corner, you'll be so agog of the library.
You'll
Across
see
the way,
West
you
Valley.
won't even see this.
So this is maximum
said
lot
that.
coverage, is that what we're?
Are we at, yeah.
I'm
are we-
sorry?
Are we at maximum lot coverage here, or?
We are, as far as we've included some patio, and it does put us pretty close.
Within
Yeah,
several
because
square
keep in
feet.
mind, I do lose some lot,
Square feet?
I do lose some lot coverage because the driveway that provides access to 521 is
Has to be
considered
within.
part of 525's lot coverage. So there's a,
Really? That's the way that works?
yes, yeah.
It's
Oh.
their
So
lot.
about 8 feet by 60 feet, that math That's part of the lot coverage for this new house.
I see. Oh,
Is that eventually going to be cement then?
The driveway for 525 is proposed to be cement.
okay.
I personally like the design. I think it'll fit well.
I think it'll fit fine, too.
That's character.
Yeah, I think it's a handsome design, sensitive to the place, thoughtful, and well-considered. I think it's suitable for that location. To us.
I like it too. I mean, I just think that we've gotten ourselves in trouble before by not, not looking at cut sheets and details. And I apologize for, it's not your fault, I know that. And it kind of, to me, it puts us in a little bit of a tight spot, but I don't have a problem with the design from what we're seeing.
I would like to see how it was cited, but I'm all about site location. But, yeah, I think the design has some character to it. It would certainly blend with other elements of neighborhood. Excuse me.
And again, I will state for the record that it is not the applicant's issue. It was a matter of time of getting it out. If you saw what time your packet came out, it did not come out in usual hours of working hours.
Okay.
With that, can I get a motion for this?
I move to approve the design for 525 Franklin as presented.
I'll second.
Roll call?
Hamilton,
Aye.
Miller,
Okay, aye.
Solomon. Stazen,
Aye.
Warner,
Aye.
Zinke,
Aye.
Zelmer.
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you to the
Thank you.
commission and the work that you put in out of your night each week. So thank you very much.
And thank you for saying that.
Okay, next on our agenda is Secretary report.
Thank you, Chairman Zelmer. I don't have much to report tonight, but I did want to bring, as I've been doing in a couple of last few meetings, I have brought several things that are what I consider modification I didn't feel comfortable with staff approving and wanted to bring back forward to the commission. So the item that's coming before you tonight is 307, 309 West State Street, which you're familiar with is the storefront rehabilitation at the future Nobel House. I'm bringing this to your attention because I know there was a lot of discussion about the storefront and the details of keeping it a storefront that was similar to the historic storefront. I know you approved it last month in my absence, but after that meeting, Dennis Kintop, who is the contractor for the project, came to me and was proposing quite a drastic header to go through the storefront to support the operable windows. To his credit and the architects, they have come up with a solution that has minimized it. But again, I felt it was a change that was at least enough that I should run by you to make sure that I was approving what the commission felt was appropriate. So if you remember in the original concept, it was a fairly narrow joining of the transom and the operable window section. Here at this meeting point, it was basically the aluminum storefronts coming together, so about a 4.5 to 5 inch total thickness with a wood element applied to it. The initially, just so you understand where this has evolved in just the last week to 10 days, Dennis, originally it was proposed to have about an 11.5 inch header run between the transom and the operable windows to support the weight of the operable window units. Dennis and I discussed this, and I said I knew that wouldn't fly with the commission because that would be a major modification. So what has been proposed is to use a piece of tube steel to keep the profile as narrow as possible that would separate the aluminum sill and the aluminum head for the transom and the storefront windows, and would increase the molding here, which was proposed to be 3.5 inches, which was about an inch wider than the historic 1909 storefront, and now is being proposed to be about 5.5 inches with a wood trim there. So again, just to kind of give you a graphic illustration, the difference of the historic storefront with the very thin horizontal member to what is being proposed now, it's about twice as thick as was originally presented to the commission when they were reviewing this. I think it's within the realm of acceptability. They're taking a little bit out of the transom, a little bit out of the operable window. But again, because I know the commission has discussed this at length, this project, I want you to be fully aware of what staff has been discussing with the contractor on this project. So this is your chance if you have questions or concerns. The contractor, Dennis Kintop, is here, and so is Alex Teipel from Architectural Resources. But I think that they have worked pretty diligently to make this work structurally and keep it as minimal as a profile as possible.
It's certainly just a clarification more than anything. Looking at that bottom right elevation, are all the transom windows on this? I know that door goes in. Mm-hmm. Are the transom windows all on the same elevation, or that transom window goes in with the doors? Well, then with that, and what's got me thinking is if you're going to put in that piece of iron, that steel beam, so how is that going to continue then in the same plane? You're going to bring that in too? Wouldn't it have been easier to just put all the transom windows on the same plane with a single beam and then just bring in the door part of it?
Well,
You'd have a soffit's condition, and it would be different than what originally was there to start with.
Well, I don't think it was
before-
ever internally projected like that.
It was historically, it was internally projected, the entire transom and everything. So they have followed the commission's original design goal to keep that as a recessed entry and to keep the recesses per the historic storefront. So,
Okay.
but I'll let Dennis explain how the steel beam is being supported within the post at the
So you're
corner.
going to have a column on either side of the door, then you'd have to carry that beam. So that beam is going to be split then rather than a single header.
Dennis
Okay.
Kintop, 613 Franklin Street, Batavia, Illinois. And I'm the contractor for Nobel House. And each individual window, it's like 6'9". That'll have a piece of steel. It's going to go
okay.
from the column at the corner by the door, and then it goes over to be tied into the masonry. I'm having the way Larry and I, Horn Steel's making the steel, we're keeping the flanges narrow. It'll sit inside the 5 1/4 inch tube steel for the glazing itself, so you won't see
Okay.
any of my anchors. I'm burying everything.
And you'll have a thermal break then that way.
Yep, and then the steel itself will be flush with the rest of them, with the 2 steel tubes, the aluminum tubes, it'll be flush
Okay.
with them so that we
Got
can
it.
just
Okay.
put the molding over the outside of it. But they're all individual. And I'm gonna have to drill and tap when I hit the 2 existing cast iron columns.
Yeah. Okay.
Can you go back to the detail itself? The 4 details? So.
Got it.
Typical.
While he's thinking, could you repeat again what the change in the width of the molding is? What was approved, I think, was 3 inches?
Was 3.5 inches,
3.5 inches.
and it's increasing now to 5.5.
5.5.
At the meeting mullion, and then there is an additional, and I can't remember that dimension, Dennis.
3/4.
So it's 3 1/4 at the top now?
3/4, so it's whatever the dimension was originally, we've added 3/4 to it. We have to add a piece of steel at all the lentils. That is a riveted lentil. I've never seen one personally before, and I'm unable to take the aluminum tube up against it and caulk it. So we're gonna take a piece of treated lumber, 3/4 inches thick, and dado out where all the rivets are. And then I gotta drill and tap that to the cast iron 3 layers. But I don't know how else to do it, otherwise I have this big ugly caulk joint and it's gonna fail. And then the other thing is on the 2 existing cast iron columns, there's about a 1/2 inch, I'll call them wings that stick out on each side of the column. So I'm putting 3/4 on that to get it out far enough. Otherwise I have this 3/4, this big ugly caulk joint, and the big joints fail, they just don't work.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm doing the 3/4, and then that'll get covered with a little bit bigger piece of wood trim. So the details are all the same, but they are slightly larger.
I have a question. So, yeah, this looks very clever and sensitive as well, so I thank you for that. Question for staff, is this dimension change within the range of historical precedent?
I'm not sure I quite understand the question, but the issue is that the net effect of these changes makes all of the storefront about twice as massive as it was in the historic configuration. That's why I didn't feel comfortable just approving it without it coming before you, so that you're aware of what you've approved. So it's the original storefront was fairly slim, and this is going to be about twice as heavy all around, based on all the things that Dennis is pointing out with structure and what have you, than what was existing historically.
I guess then, as a follow-up, is this then novel in the palette of storefront design? Is it more massive, or is it fairly consistent?
Well, again, the reason I'm bringing it forward to you is that the original direction of the commission was to restore the storefront with the intent that it would be a lightweight-looking storefront. I think that, again, as I said at the beginning of my comments, that what was initially brought forward about 8 days ago, was a significant alteration of what the storefront was described to be. I think this comes as close as you can to getting back to those dimensions and still being able to achieve what the Nobel House people want to do with an operable window. As you may recall, that's been a question that staff has had from day one, is how the operable window was being supported in such a thin profile. And what has come out in the last, again, 7 to 8 days is that it needed some more support. The original idea that was brought forward, I rejected because I knew it wasn't close to what staff had, or what the commission had discussed. And I think that Dennis, in working with Horn Steel, has come up with something that is probably as slim as it can be to meet the general intent of a historically inspired storefront and get the operable storefront in place. If it was not an operable storefront, the details could be completely different.
Yeah.
So this is kind of a compromise to achieve what the applicant is seeking and trying to be at least historically sensitive to what was there.
So if I understand what you've written on the screen, the original transom and joining mullions were 2 1/4 inches. And so now we're jumping up to 5 1/2. Is that?
That's approximately what they were, yes. They varied around the storefront.
It was we couldn't build it the way it's designed originally, because it was just a flat 2x8, so it's just structurally, they won't let me do it today.
The original, yeah, well, on the left is the original detail, and the right,
Yeah, the outside trim was.
Those were, yeah,
these are the original details that were approved. These that are bubbled, again, when you've got the bubble around it, that's an architect's symbol of revision. So these are what, so ones on the right are the ones that have been changed.
The revision then positions that steel member in between the 2 aluminum, which is the one over there, okay?
That's the tube steel that's being
Right.
inserted.
Okay,
And so this piece of wood molding has become larger.
right.
And they've taken a little bit out of the transom and a little bit out of the
Okay.
operating windows to achieve that.
did you look at the option of backing up the two mullions with the iron behind it and attaching this way to keep the profile the same? Like with a channel or even an angle would carry the box beam in that orientation. Well, the span isn't much, it's only like,
It wouldn't work on the inside because of, if you'll see the hinge in that mechanism for the window.
all comes out.
Right.
Got it, okay. Yeah, then
And
that's
the-
about all you can do.
I think it's worth pointing out that the wood that we took off that was there, that was exposed, was 1x cedar, new material, not old, and it was about 3.5 inches wide.
Okay.
Well, 3 versus 5 is,
I think it's a reasonable compromise.
It's a reasonable compromise, but it's,
from across the street, it probably is
In
insignificant.
the way you design this, that'll be the same center line. You've just built it up in both directions.
how does that work with the door? Is the door shorter then? Is the door,
It's a new door.
okay, so it's not a 7.0 door or anything like that? It's,
I believe it is. I don't remember, so I don't want to say.
okay.
I could be wrong. I just am scared.
The transom is short.
This is not a Senate hearing, you're okay.
No, I was just curious, like, yeah. Can you go back to the elevation just one more time?
What are we talking about color-wise? I mean, will it be, are you I'm thinking if it's a very dark color, it's going to show, it's going to be more massive looking than if it was a lighter color.
It's got a piece of trim over the top of it
Yeah, there's
that
trim
that brings it all
on the
together.
outside,
So
so
you're not gonna see the three different parts like you're seeing there, correct?
Oh, okay, but still, my question is,
Yeah, I know, but the,
in terms of aesthetics, is the trim going to be a darkish color, or are we going lighter? Or do you actually even know?
I really don't know. I know it's where the building is already painted white.
Yes.
I know that they want to use a blue awning. I want to say that we used black when we did Glen Ellen, a black frame. But again, I don't want to tell you and then have you mad. I'll find out and let you know.
Well, no, I'm just thinking that,
we don't put the colors per se.
we don't, but I was just thinking that if it was a lighter color, it wouldn't be as noticeable. That's my only point.
I understand and I don't know.
Right,
I'm
okay.
hoping it's not blue.
Oh, my.
Or pink.
Yes, I'm grateful that it's 5.5 inches. If this was 11.5,
yeah.
I don't know what,
Well, a simple conversation between us, and then I went to Larry at Horn Steel, and I talked to two window guys, and it's the same tube steel that we used when we built the police station years ago, the blue color on the police station. Not that there's anything wrong with that blue color.
It's Swedish blue.
It's a 2x6 by 3/16 steel tube.
Okay.
So this width, this trim width that we're talking about, the elevation, it's going to go both 309 and 307. It'll be consistent all the way across.
All the way across. And then we're taking the two, you have the two columns in the center of the building that are cast iron.
Right.
Then we, over to the right side, we did two more, because you got the door you're gonna go in, the two in the center and the two to the right. I'm gonna take the two to the right and I'm matching what the steel, the cast iron columns. We're gonna put a piece of 5-pound on those so it matches exactly, because I can buy that same detail today. So everything is gonna be the same width as we go across. We're making sure of that so it's correct. Because I want it to all look, you'll see it if it's not balanced.
That's true.
Yeah, I think it's a good compromise. I mean, if we're going to use the operable windows, then
Right. I don't see many other options.
There's a lot of torque.
What color are the operable windows? Are they dark bronze, or are they gonna be? But I guess we approved those already. They're approved.
I think we did black there.
The representation was they're going to look very similar to the windows that are at the current Nobel House, which is a dark anodized bronze, so they're either black or dark anodized
Yeah.
bronze.
Dark bronze almost ends up black most of the time.
That's what's been mentioned in the past.
Okay. We approved that already, so we can't go back on that one.
I'm okay with it.
Yeah, I'm okay with it.
Okay. I will go ahead and continue processing that. I just, like I said, I wanted to make sure the commission was okay with.
I appreciate you doing that.
Yes, thank you.
So this was the secretary report.
Yes. And I have nothing else for the commission unless you have questions about any of my activities of late.
But
Do you have something?
I did just have one question. Has there been any update on across the river? I just went
Oh,
bowling.
the mill race.
Mill Race Inn.
We're good.
On
Thank you.
when we might see it, kind of where it's at.
As far as I know, has not been anything brought forward. I think they're waiting for some of their traffic studies from the Illinois Department of Transportation. That's not one of my projects. It's being handled by David DeGroot, Director of Community Development, and Kathleen Timoshenko, the Director of Economic Development. I can check with them and get something back to you, but
Okay.
last I checked, it was waiting on some traffic configurations and approvals.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So we have no idea yet when they're going to be coming to us?
The last I knew, there is nothing that's scheduled coming forward with anything.
Okay,
I checked about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago.
okay. So then coming to us in October didn't work out?
No.
Okay.
Sometimes things take longer than they expect.
Yes.
I'd like to move to adjourn.
Unless anyone's got anything else.
You have a hot date?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. We're adjourned.